What's up, guys? Welcome to the Mana Fix, where we cover Commander deck techs across various archetypes, budgets, and themes. Well, Ikoria Lair of Behemoths is dropping soon, and I have to say, I feel like this set is one of the better sets that we've seen in recent years. It provides tons of awesome cards for EDH, especially when it comes to new commanders. One of those new commanders that I was immediately interested in is Rielle the Everwise. Rielle is a 0/3 human wizard for 1 blue-red that says, Rielle the Everwise gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Whenever you discard one or more cards for the first time each turn, draw that many cards. So obviously, wheel effects with Rielle are absolutely stupid. Not only that, but there are loads of cards in Magic that are cheap to cast that force you to discard cards in order to draw more cards. These are going to help us quickly filter through our deck. Another great thing about this commander is that a lot of the cards that synergize well with her fall in the range of around 10 cents to $1. Because of that fact, I decided to work with a budget of $150, and I feel like the deck is still quite competitive considering. So the goal of this deck is to take advantage of Rielle's discard trigger to filter through our deck quickly, all the while building up Rielle's power and smashing our opponents in the face with her. Eventually, we should be able to win with either commander damage or one of our other win conditions. Now let's get into it. We'll start things off with ramp here. We don't need too much of it though. Rielle is a 3 CMC commander, so she's easy to get out, and most of our spells are lower on the mana curve as well. Still, ramp is an important piece to a functional deck. First up, we're running Wayfarer's Bauble. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal Mitch's thunder, but this is a great ramp card for non-green decks. It's a 1 CMC artifact that has an ability where we can pay 2, tap it, and sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land and put it into play tapped. And then of course we're running Soul Ring at 1 CMC. We have 6 total mana rocks at 2 CMC. Arcane Signet can tap for red or blue. Fellwar Stone has a chance to do the same, and Talisman of Creativity can tap for red or blue, but it's going to deal 1 damage to us each time. Izzet Signet will help fix our colors, and Mind Stone only taps for a colorless, but we can sacrifice it to draw a card if we don't need the mana. Last of the mana rocks is Thought Vessel. This only taps for a colorless, but it also says we have no maximum hand size. This ability is great in this deck because we're going to be drawing tons of cards, and it's better to keep those cards in our hand than to discard them at our end steps. Now you might be thinking, why? Rielle likes it when we discard cards, right? True, but if we have more than 7 cards in our hand at our end step, it's likely that the reason for that is because we already took advantage of Rielle's discard trigger during that turn. Remember, she only triggers once each turn. So if we have to discard at our end step, we're not going to draw those cards back. So it's better to keep those cards in our hand and use them later than to discard them. Goblin Electromancer is a great card in this deck. It makes all of our instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. We have 39 instant and sorcery spells in the deck, so this card is going to help us cast more spells each turn. And then we have 1 untapper in the deck, and that's Vizier of Tumbling Sands. It's a 3 CMC creature that we can tap to untap a permanent, such as a land or an artifact. It also has Cycling. Cycling is great with our commander because it can be done at instant speed. So if we don't need Vizier on the board for the additional mana, we can cycle it on an opponent's turn. That's going to trigger Rielle's ability because Rielle triggers for the first time you discard cards on each turn, not just your own turn. Now let's really get into the meat of the deck here. What really makes this deck run is all of the discard effects that we run. And there's tons of them, so let's get started. Careful Study and Faithless Looting are both 1 CMC sorceries that say draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. Faithless Looting can also be cast from the graveyard for 1 red and 2 other. With Rielle out, we'll end up drawing a total of 4 cards and discarding 2 cards. Burning Inquiry is also a sorcery for 1 red mana that says each player draws 3 cards, then discards 3 cards at random. Rielle will give us 3 more cards for a total of 6. Burning Inquiry applies to our opponents as well, so this may even have a negative effect on them depending on what they're forced to discard. Breakthrough costs 1 blue and X for a sorcery that says draw 4 cards, then choose X cards in your hand and discard the rest. The idea behind this one is to have Rielle on the battlefield and cast this for X is 0. That will make you discard your entire hand and then draw that many cards. So this is essentially a 1 mana wheel that gives you 4 additional cards. Rites of Initiation is another great card in this deck, and this one can be cast at instant speed. It's a 1 red mana instant that says you can discard any number of cards at random. Creatures you control get +1/+0 for each card discarded this way. Basically, we're going to use this when Rielle is out to discard our hand, then draw that many cards. When we do, we're going to pump Rielle too, which means more commander damage. Desperate Ravings and Thrill of Possibility each cost 1 red and 1 other for an instant. Desperate Ravings draws us 2 cards but forces us to discard a card at random. This one also has Flashback for 1 blue and 2 other. Flashback is nice in this deck because if we end up discarding this card to one of our other spells, we can still cast it from the graveyard. Thrill of Possibility draws us 2 cards at the additional cost of discarding a card. So this is a discard 1, draw 3 with Rielle. The fact that these 2 cards are instants is great too because we can use them on our opponent's turns to trigger Rielle more times per rotation. Next up, we have Cathartic Reunion and Dangerous Wager. With Rielle out, Cathartic Reunion says discard 2 cards, draw 5 cards for only 2 mana. Dangerous Wager is excellent with Rielle. With this, we're going to discard our hand, then draw 2 cards. This is similar to Breakthrough in that it acts like a wheel with Rielle out. This is another instant speed card too. That's the last time I'll stress that, but it is important to take advantage of Rielle's ability on our opponent's turns to really get the most out of her. That's why I've also included a couple looters too. Merfolk Looter and Thought Courier both have tap abilities that allow us to draw a card, then discard a card. Magus of the Bazaar is similar, but its tap ability says draw 2 cards, then discard 3 cards. With Rielle out though, we end up drawing a total of 5 cards and discarding 3. Next up is Tectonic Reformation. This is an enchantment for 1 red and 1 other that gives all lands in our hands cycling for just 1 red mana. This is great because, again, cycling can be done at instant speed. This also gives us a way to pitch lands we don't need and replace them with something more useful. We have one more card in this category, and it may not be the best card in this category, but to me it's the most interesting. The card I'm referring to is Bag of Holding. This is a 1-cost artifact with a few abilities. The first is whenever we discard a card, it gets exiled. Now this is actually kind of counterintuitive because our deck likes having cards in our graveyard. But let's read on. We can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. Rielle will trigger with this ability even though the card is getting exiled because we are still quote-unquote discarding it. The last ability is what gets me excited about this card. We can pay 4 and sacrifice it to put all cards exiled with Bag of Holding into our hand. This deck is made to discard a bunch of cards. If we drop this on turn 1, it's likely that we're going to have quite a few cards exiled with Bag of Holding by turn 4, 5, or 6 when we're ready to sacrifice it. So this does open yourself up a little bit to getting burned by removal because if someone does remove the Bag of Holding, those cards are going to remain exiled for the remainder of the game. But if you can pull off a massive draw with that last ability, it's going to be a frickin' blast. So personally, I think the card is worth it. Moving on, but not totally switching gears here, we're going to go over the wheels that are included in this deck. If the discard cards are good cards in this deck, then the wheels are absolute bombs. Let's start with Tolarian Winds, for example. This costs 1 blue and 1 other for an instant that says discard your hand, then draw that many cards. So let's say we have 5 cards in hand after we play this with Rielle on the battlefield. We're going to discard our hand and then draw 10 cards. 10 cards. That's a lot. And it only cost us 2 mana to do that, which, I mean, if you're looking for value, that's it right there. Next up is Reforge the Soul. This is as close as we can get to a Wheel of Fortune without running Wheel of Fortune. With this, everyone discards their hand and draws 7 cards. But as we know, we'll be drawing more with our commander. It also has a miracle cost, which is an added bonus, although it may not come up all that often. Windfall is a great wheel effect too. With this one, everyone is going to discard their hands and then draw cards equal to the greatest number discarded this way. Next we have a wheel on a creature. Magus of the Wheel costs 1 red and 2 other for a 2/2. We can pay 1 red and 1 other to tap it and sacrifice him to have everyone wheel. This is another ability that can be activated at instant speed. We have one more wheel effect, and this one is the first all-star of the deck. Jace's Archivist costs 2 blue and 1 other for a 2/2 Vidalcan Wizard. We can pay 1 blue and tap him to have each player discard their hands, then draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. So essentially, this is a windfall on a stick. Similar to Magus of the Wheel, it can be used at instant speed. The reason this is better than that, though, is because we don't need to sacrifice the creature to activate the ability, so it can be used multiple times. Imagine on an opponent's turn activating this and discarding, say, 6 cards and then drawing 6 cards. With Rielle out, we'll draw 6 more to make it a total of 12 cards in our hand. Now it comes around to our turn and we have 13 cards in our hand. If we activate Jace's Archivist again, now we're going to draw 26 cards. Now in doing this, remember that you're also allowing your opponents to draw a new hand of 13 cards. This can be dangerous, so it's best to use this ability in conjunction with one of our win conditions we'll discuss a little later. Now let's go over how this deck is going to interact with our opponents. Interaction for this deck consists of single target removal, board wipes, and counter spells. We'll start with the removal, and first up, we're running a couple staples in Pongify and Chaos Warp. These are two very efficient spells that can be slotted into just about any Izzet deck. Pongify destroys a creature for just 1 mana and leaves behind a 3/3. Chaos Warp shuffles any permanent into its owner's library for just 3 mana. The next two cards have dual purposes because they act as both removal and discard effects. Fateful Showdown costs 2 red and 2 other for an instant. It deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of cards in our hand. Then we discard our hand and draw that many cards. This card might even be able to kill someone if our hand is big enough. If not, we can get rid of a problematic creature and wheel. Turbulent Dreams is a fantastic inclusion in this deck. We discard X cards to return X non-land permanents to their owner's hands. Discarding cards isn't a big deal because we'll get them back with Rielle, and if we have a big enough hand, this can even be as effective as a Cyclonic Rift, which is just incredible for 2 mana. We have one more card here that's capable of removing creatures, but it can actually do a few different things. Surly Badgersaur is a new card from Commander 2020. For 4 mana, it's a 3/3 creature that has triggered abilities when we discard certain cards. Whenever we discard a creature, he'll get a +1/+1 counter. Whenever we discard a land, he gives us a treasure token. This is probably the best ability on here. We're always discarding cards to draw more cards with this deck. So in discarding land cards, we're going to get more mana, which we can then use to cast the new cards that we drew into. This will help us to chain together multiple spells in a single turn. The last ability triggers when we discard a non-creature, non-land card. When that happens, Surly Badgersaur fights up to 1 target creature we don't control. This is going to trigger quite a bit as most of our deck is instants and sorceries. So our opponents aren't really going to be able to keep their creatures on the board. It's also worth noting that it says up to 1, which means if the only creature on the board is bigger than Surly Badgersaur, we don't need to have it fight that creature, so we don't have to put it in harm's way. Now let's move on to the board wipes in this deck. Coastal Breach is a really solid blue board wipe. It costs 7, but it has Undaunted, so most of the time this will be a 4 mana board wipe. Also, it hits all non-land permanents, not just creatures, so this one is actually quite efficient. And next up is Evacuation. Creatures are a big threat to this deck because we don't run too many ourselves, so it's relatively easy to get damage in on us. This is going to reset the board as far as creatures are concerned, and it can do it at instant speed. Now we get into the interesting board wipes that are kind of exclusive to this deck. First is Sweltering Suns. For 2 red and 1 other, this sorcery deals 3 damage to each creature. That may not seem like a lot, but I think you'd be surprised at how many creatures this spell is able to remove. What I really like about it though is the cycling for 3 mana, which of course has synergy with our commander. The last board wipe, and possibly the best one, is Chandra's Ignition. This is a 5 CMC sorcery that says target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. The idea with this is that Rielle's power is often going to be quite high due to the fact that we're constantly discarding cards. Remember, our commander gets +1/+0 for each instant and sorcery card in our graveyard. So if we have, say, 15 instants and sorceries in our graveyard, which is by no means out of the question, we're going to kill every creature but Rielle, and we're going to deal 15 damage to each of our opponents. I mean, that's just silly for a 5 mana card. Okay, moving on, let's talk about the counterspells in the deck. Flusterstorm is here as a 1 CMC counterspell. You'll find when playing this deck that it can sometimes turn into a storm deck where you're chaining together multiple discard draw spells until you can find a win condition. Flusterstorm is going to come in handy if your opponent tries to counter your win con. It's just 1 mana, so it's very easy to cast, and in these circumstances, there's almost no way that your opponent will be able to stop it because it's going to create a whole bunch of copies of itself. Izzet Charm is next, and isn't just a counterspell. It has the ability to counter a non-creature spell, but I like this one for its flexibility. It can also deal 2 damage to a creature, or it can be used as another discard effect. And now we have 2 more counterspells that again involve discarding cards. Foil is 2 blue and 2 other for an instant that says counter target spell. It has an alternate casting cost as well. We can discard an island and another card to cast this for free. With Rielle out, we'll draw 2 cards and get a free counterspell. Seems good. And then Forbid is a counter target spell for 2 blue and 1 other. What makes this fantastic though is the buyback ability on it. When we cast this, we can discard 2 cards to have it returned to our hand when it resolves. If we've gotten to the point where we have a whole bunch of cards in our hand, then this counterspell is pretty much never going away. Now we have one more card that fits under this category of interaction, and it's the second all-star of the deck. Narset, Parter of Veils, is a 5 loyalty planeswalker for 2 blue and 1 other. She has a static ability that says each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. Now just playing this card alone is very effective. Any sort of card draw that your opponents already have in play or were planning on playing is now nullified. But what makes this card exceptional in this deck is combining it with wheel effects. If Narset is out and we cast, say, a Reforge the Soul, we're going to discard our hands and draw 7 cards. Our opponents will discard their hands as well, but are only going to draw 1 card. And this is assuming that this is all happening on our turn. If it happens on an opponent's turn, then that opponent's hand will be discarded and they won't draw any cards since they've already drawn their 1 card at their draw step. This is pretty darn mean, and it's quite effective in shutting our opponents down. Narset can also dig for a spell if we're short on cards with her -2 ability. Now we have a few miscellaneous inclusions. It was hard to fit them into a specific category, and I wasn't clever enough to come up with a good name for this category, so we're just going to go with miscellaneous. First up, we have a few rituals. Desperate Ritual costs 1 red and 1 other for an instant that adds 3 red mana to our mana pool. It has Splice onto Arcane, but this is the only Arcane spell we run, so that's not going to matter. Pyretic Ritual is functionally the same in this deck. 2 mana, add 3 mana. Real simple. Last one here is High Tide. It's an instant for 1 blue mana that makes all islands tap for an additional blue mana until end of turn. These ritual effects do a great job of giving our mana base that little extra boost that it needs to make it easier for us to chain our spells together and dig for a win condition. Speaking of digging, we're running a few cards that provide card advantage that don't actually discard. We have a couple spells with Delve that I'll cover first. Treasure Cruise costs 1 blue mana and 7 other for a sorcery that says draw 3 cards, but Delve is going to help us cast this for much, much cheaper. We can exile cards from our graveyard instead of paying the generic mana to cast this. So we can cast it for as little as 1 blue, and that's going to be relatively easy to do because, as we all know by now, this deck discards cards like crazy. Dig Through Time is the other Delve spell in this deck. It's 2 blue and 6 other for an instant. With this, we get to look at the top 7 cards of our library and put 2 of those cards into our hand. 7 is quite a few cards to be able to look at. If we can't find a win condition with this, at the least we'll be able to find ourselves something that'll help us with whatever given situation we're in when we cast it. And again, this is going to be pretty easy to cast for just 2 blue mana. Curiosity is another card that'll help us filter through our deck a bit faster. This is something that we can enchant Rielle with since part of our game is trying to get damage through with her. Every time the enchanted creature deals damage, we're going to draw a card. Simple and effective. This card becomes a lot better though when we're enchanting 2 creatures in particular that are also in the deck. We'll talk about those here shortly. The next miscellaneous spell I'll cover is actually a tutor. Gamble costs 1 red for a sorcery that lets us search our library for a card and put it into our hand. Afterwards, we're forced to discard a card at random. If our hand size gets to be as big as this deck is capable of making it, discarding a card at random is unlikely to affect us very much. Plus, we'll get an additional card draw off of that with Rielle. And 1 mana for a tutor is value that is almost unheard of, particularly when the card goes to your hand rather than the top of your library. And next up, we're going to run Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots in this deck too. Rielle is the backbone of this deck, and as a result, it's very important to keep her protected. Lightning Greaves gives her Shroud, and Swiftfoot Boots gives her Hexproof. The boots are probably a bit better since we can still target Rielle when these are equipped. It does cost 1 mana to equip though, as opposed to the 0 equip cost on the Greaves. There are 2 more cards left in the miscellaneous category. They are Past in Flames and Underworld Breach. Both of these are going to let us use the spells that we've discarded into our graveyard. Past in Flames costs 4 total mana for a sorcery that gives each instant and sorcery in our graveyard flashback. So this is really a late game spell that we're going to want to use once we have a lot of mana at our disposal, because it takes 4 mana to get this effect going to begin with, and then we still need to pay the mana costs for any spell that we do decide to cast from our graveyard. Still, if you think about it, this is like adding all the instants and sorceries in your graveyard to your hand for a turn. So it's going to give us loads of options. Underworld Breach is similar, but also has some differences. For starters, this is an enchantment, and it's much cheaper to cast at only 2 mana. This one applies to all non-land cards in our graveyard, however, not just instants and sorceries, which is a plus. It allows us to play these cards from our graveyard by paying their mana costs, but we do have to exile 3 other cards from our graveyard as an additional cost to cast each spell. That makes it a little bit harder to cast multiple spells off of it, but in this deck, we're probably going to have quite a few cards in our graveyard, so that isn't a huge setback. Now that we've gone over the bulk of the deck and how it runs, let's talk about how we're going to win with it. The first win condition we'll talk about is commander damage. Rielle's power is going to get pretty darn high with all the cards we're discarding. While her power might be really high, we still might not be able to get through with her if our opponents have creatures that can block. Rielle has no way of getting around blockers on her own, so we need to run a few ways to do that. Wonder is a great card in this deck. If it's in the graveyard and we control an island, creatures we control have flying. So as soon as we see this card in our hand, we're going to discard it to one of our many discard spells. We have 8 islands in the deck, and with drawing as often as we do, we won't have trouble finding one. This is a great way to make getting commander damage in easier without having to pay mana or cast a spell to do it. Leap is another card that can give Rielle flying. This card may seem like a silly inclusion, but giving Rielle flying for even just one turn can sometimes be enough to knock one of our opponents out of the game. Plus, this is an instant speed cantrip as well, so it's never going to be a dead card in our hand. Artful Dodge is one of my favorite evasion spells in this deck. It's a sorcery that makes a creature unblockable for a turn for just 1 blue mana. It also has flashback for 1 blue. This is the best part about it because we don't even need to cast it from our hand to take advantage of it. If it ends up getting discarded, no problem, just cast it from the graveyard. Fists of Flame is a great way to get through with commander damage as well. 1 red and 1 other for an instant that first has you draw a card. Then, target creature gets +1/+0 for each card you drew this turn, and it gets trample. As we know, there are turns where we'll be drawing a bunch of cards. It's not unheard of for this to pump Rielle by 10 or more. And the addition of trample will mean that we're going to be able to get through with most of that damage. The last card to help with evasion here is Key to the City. This is a 2-cost artifact that can make Rielle unblockable. The cost to do that is tapping it and discarding a card, which is normally pretty bad, except that Rielle likes it when we discard cards. Also, when this artifact becomes untapped, we have the option to pay 2 generic mana to draw a card. So it has some additional card draw built into it too if we need it. Continuing on the theme of combat, but less on the evasion side, is Seize the Day. This is a 4-cost sorcery that untaps a target creature and gives us an additional combat phase. The best part about this card is that it has flashback for 3 mana. So we don't need to cast it from our hand. If we do though, we can actually use the spell twice in 1 turn if we have 7 or more mana at our disposal. When Rielle is big enough, casting the spell twice will often just win us the game, especially if we're able to make Rielle unblockable. Commander damage is not the only way that we can win in this deck though either. There are a few other options that aren't combat related at all. Thassa's Oracle is one you might have expected. Again, this deck is designed to filter through our library very quickly. With the possibility of drawing 20 or more cards in a single turn, you need something that can win you the game with an empty library. That's this card's job, and it does it very effectively. Glinthorn Buccaneer is another card that can win us games. This is a 3-mana 2/4 with haste that deals 1 damage to each of our opponents whenever we discard a card. This isn't a throw it down and win kind of card. It does have to stick around for a little while to be effective. But even having this out for just a few rotations can be pretty devastating to our opponents with all of the discard and wheel effects we're running. And this doesn't need to straight up win us the game as long as it's helping us to get there. If it is slowly whittling our opponent's life totals down, then when we are able to attack with Rielle, we'll have a better chance of getting in for lethal damage. This does also have a discard effect on it too, but we have to be attacking with it in order to activate the ability. It's unlikely that we'll want to put this creature in harm's way just for a discard outlet, but it's there if we need it. And the last win condition here is our final all-star of the deck. Niv Mizzet Parun costs 3 blue and 3 red for a 5/5 legendary dragon wizard with flying. He cannot be countered. Whenever you draw a card, Niv Mizzet deals 1 damage to any target. Whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you draw a card. Let's just talk about how great this card is on its own. First off, the fact that it can't be countered is amazing. This dragon is resolving. Period. End of story. It comes down as a 5/5 with flying. It draws us a card whenever any player casts an instant or sorcery spell. So if someone tries to remove it, generally the spell they use to do so is going to be an instant or sorcery. So there's no card disadvantage to playing this because even if it gets killed right away, you're still going to draw a card off of that. Now if it doesn't get killed right away, we can absolutely wreak havoc on our opponents. Wheeling with this card on the battlefield is especially effective. Imagine we have 7 cards in hand and Rielle and Niv Mizzet on the battlefield. We cast a Tolarian Winds. First, this is going to trigger Niv Mizzet because it's an instant, so we'll draw a card and that'll put us up to 7 cards. Drawing a card triggers Niv Mizzet and will deal 1 damage to any target. Now Tolarian Winds resolves. We discard 7 cards and draw 7 cards. Now we have 7 Niv Mizzet triggers and a Rielle trigger. Let's resolve Rielle first. So we'll draw 7 more cards, triggering Niv Mizzet 7 more times. That's a total of 14 damage. That interaction only costs us 2 total mana. So we're likely to be able to cast even more instants and sorceries, which are triggering Niv and probably also drawing us cards, adding to the damage total. And even if we can't kill an opponent with just the damage from Niv, you have to remember that we also have the combat step to finish the person off if we need it. So yeah, this card is amazing, and that's leaving out the fact that it goes infinite with Curiosity. If you don't know how this works, I'll quickly explain it. Curiosity says whenever the enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So what happens is as soon as we trigger Niv Mizzet's draw ability while Curiosity is enchanting him, we draw a card and deal 1 damage to an opponent. That triggers Curiosity and we draw a card. That triggers Niv and we direct the 1 damage to an opponent, again triggering Curiosity. And it goes back and forth like this until everyone is dead or you run out of cards. Now generally, we won't have enough cards in our deck to kill everyone at the table. We may have to find some other means to do that. Generally, that would consist of using the combat step to finish people off or throwing down our Thassa's Oracle once our library is low on cards. Finally, let's go over the utility lands that we're going to run in this deck. Obviously, cycling lands are great in this deck, so we'll start with those. Forgotten Cave and Lonely Sandbar enter tapped, but can both be cycled for just 1 mana. Remote Isle and Smoldering Crater are the same, but the cycle cost is 2 generic mana as opposed to just 1 of either blue or red. Blasted Landscape is a colorless land with the same cycle cost, but this land enters the battlefield untapped. Ash Barrens is the last cycle land we have. It's a colorless land that enters untapped and has basic land cycling for 1 mana, so we can go and grab an island or a mountain if we need it. We also have some discard outlets built into our lands. Desolate Lighthouse is a land that taps for colorless, but we can also pay 1 red-blue and tap it to draw a card, then discard a card. Gaia Reach Sanitarium taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 and tap it to have each player draw a card, then discard a card. We're going to benefit the most from this as Rielle will allow us to draw an additional card. Cephalid Coliseum is the most effective of the 3 here. This one taps for blue mana and deals 1 damage to us as its mana producing ability. The second ability we can only activate if we meet the requirements for Threshold. All we need is a minimum of 7 total cards in our graveyard, which is very easy to accomplish. We can pay 1 blue, tap, and sacrifice Cephalid Coliseum to draw 3 cards and discard 3 cards. With Rielle out, though, we'll draw a total of 6 cards. Moving on, let's talk about Drownyard Temple. This is another land that taps for colorless mana. It also has an ability where you can pay 3 generic mana to put it into play tapped from the graveyard. So this is basically ramp for us because if we end up discarding this to one of our discard spells, we can then put it onto the battlefield for 3 mana and it doesn't count as our 1 land per turn. Emergence Zone is a great utility land in this deck too. A lot of our discard effects are only sorcery speed, but we want to be able to take advantage of Rielle's trigger as often as possible. If we sacrifice this land on an opponent's turn, we can cast our sorcery speed spells at instant speed, thus triggering Rielle and drawing more cards. Reliquary Tower gives us no maximum hand size. As we went over before, this is great in this deck because we're going to be drawing tons of cards and it's better to keep those cards in our hand than to discard them at our end steps. Now that we're through with that, let's see what the overall price comes to. So here's what we managed to put this deck together for. Now this price excludes basic lands. Considering how effective this deck seems to be, I think that's a pretty darn good price. Well, that's going to be it for this deck tech. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you're notified when new deck techs come out. You can also follow us on Twitter at @themanifixmtg. Thanks for getting your fix with me today, stay safe out there, and peace out, guys.